Thank you. Good morning. Thank you very much, Professor Tanter, and I'm very honored to be here with so many esteemed colleagues and some very dear friends among them, and also to be with you today to share a few thoughts. And a very auspicious day as we celebrate a new year and also remember all the martyrs, these young students, which just make an impression upon you that's one of those life impressions. Their bravery, their courage, the honor and the commitment. And, you know, as the chairman said, the women, I mean, the women of Iran have been heroes and leaders, not just in the in-country, front-of-the-line danger movement, but also behind the scenes and working. You know, some critics say that our foreign policy is a little bit behind. We were a little bit behind the Jasmine Revolution. We were a little bit behind Egypt. Where we are right now is a subject of a long debate with maybe some confusion. But with respect to the MEK, you know, we're 14 years behind. And that's a long time to be wrong on the facts. And I think, as Judge Poe mentioned, it's really the facts. Show me the evidence with respect to the MEK's eligibility for being on the foreign terrorism list, and there is none. At least there is none that nobody knows. It's also very interesting. I did a Google search last night. Sometimes as you're a lawyer and you're preparing for arguments, you know, you like to see who's on one side, who's on the other side, particularly who's not on your side. It's very interesting. I did a pretty elaborate search, and my 10-year-old helped me, so I know it was efficient. I can't find anybody opposing the delisting of MEK except the Iranian regime. There's a certain inference that you can draw from that. During the incredible events that Judge McKasey spoke about, you know, one of the world leaders said the following: "The enemy is using its security forces against you in order to put fear and intimidation in your hearts. Do not fear them. You are stronger than these people who have been paid for." Well, the comment was made by the supreme religious leader of the Republic of Iran. And the unembarrassed, as Judge McKasey wrote, statement of someone who, you know, consistently and systematically murdered his own people, mostly his youth, to make that kind of a statement. So the subject here this morning is very serious, it's very important, and it should be, as one of the speakers said, a very immediate decision. We know bureaucracy works slow. I was in probably one of the most leading bureaucracies in the world for many, many years, but at some point a decision has to be made and the facts have to prove what they are or what they're not. And there is absolutely no credible evidence, at least that anybody has heard, we think even on the classified basis, that justifies the maintenance of this organization, MEK, on the foreign terrorist organization list. In fact, all of the evidence militates against it. So Winston Churchill, I think, once said that, you know, the Americans can be counted upon to do the right thing after they've exhausted every other possibility. So 14 years is a long time to look at the facts. We know the State Department has been looking at the facts since August, when the Court of Appeals here in Washington said you violated due process, you were unconstitutional with respect to MEK, do it again. This is not, ladies and gentlemen, a complicated situation. The facts here are not interwoven with, you know, subtle and complicated foreign policy issues. It's whether this organization is a terrorist organization or not under the statute. So what does Secretary Clinton and President Obama need to do quickly, we hope? Delist the MEK, protect the heroes in Camp Ashraf, and make sure that we support freedom in Iran as opposed to standing silent, and by our silence facilitating the murderous prosecution by the regime. Just in the newspapers a couple weeks ago, as they were shooting at young students in Tehran, the government said that even the United States lists the MEK as a terrorist organization, and these people are clearly in league with the terrorist organization. So It's not that by our silence nothing is happening. By our silence and the maintenance of this organization on the list, we're actually promoting and facilitating the promulgation and the propagation of terrorism. Maliki's foreign national security advisor, who was responsible for Ashraf, said in 2009 that there was an intention to make life unbearable for the residents. Now, those are the people who are now protecting these people. In February of 2009, Khomeini publicly revealed a mutual agreement with Maliki to, quote, eliminate Ashraf, and complained publicly that Iraq was moving too slow with respect to its part of the bargain. So where did this all start? It started in 1993, listing this organization as a terrorist group. And what was going on at the time is pretty well known. It's historical, but very relevant to the perpetuation of this mistake, which it is. There was the thought in the White House that there was a new moderate regime that had taken over the government, and it was an opportune time for the United States to show its goodwill and extend an olive branch to this group. So all of a sudden, in June of 1993, there was a very pronounced change in the foreign policy of the United States with respect to Iran. Quite ironically, this was weeks after the Khobar Towers attack, where 19 American servicemen were murdered by a Hezbollah operation that came out of the eastern province of Saudi Arabia. But after the investigation by the FBI, which the President, by the way, publicly ordered, it was clear that the bombers were trained by the IRGC in the Bekaa Valley. They were given passports in the Iranian embassy in Damascus. And General Sharifi, who was a senior IRGC general, gave the lead bomber $250,000 in cash to conduct the operation. Hundreds of people were wounded. Saudis were killed in the park across the street from the barracks. This was one of the most notorious acts of war, acts of terrorism against the United States perpetuated by the current regime in Tehran. So we opened up an investigation, and we were told, quote, leave no stone unturned, which is very clear directions to a police officer. So we conducted a very thorough investigation, and after a long period of time and a lot of resistance in the White House, quite honestly, we got the evidence that I just summarized to you. The best support we had during that investigation, by the way, was from General Shelton in the United States military. And that's about the only place in Washington where we had support. When we had all this evidence, we brought it to the National Security Advisor of the United States. And I must say, I've had strange moments in Washington, but this had to be the strangest. I said to him, sir, this was done by the IRGC, and I gave him all the facts that I just gave you. And he looked at me and he said, who knows about this? And I said, well, 50 FBI agents, the Attorney General of the United States, and now you, sir. And the reaction was to call a meeting and draft some press plans so we could respond to the Republicans on the Hill. This is not a bipartisan issue, but it is a very clear explanation of why we are in this ridiculous position of the listing at this time. During that period of time, I was called up by the Secretary of State, and I was told that the Iranian wrestlers were complaining because the FBI agents were photographing them and fingerprinting them at the airport. And I said, well, I understand that they're complaining. I said, do you know why we do that? And the response was, well, you have to stop because you're annoying the Iranians. And I said, well, Madam Secretary, we found that in those wrestling teams, you know, there's one member of the team who looks a little bit unfit and out of place. Well, he's the MOIS agent. And by fingerprinting him and photographing him, we keep him off the team, if you know what I mean. So that was a big issue. The fact of the matter was, it was a good faith attempt, I believe, to encourage discussion and a relationship with the Republic of Iran. But as Judge Mukasey said, it failed. And then it failed later under the next administration, where we thought reasonably we were going to get some quid pro quo for continuing the sponsorship of MEK on our list, i.e., less attacks against Americans through IEDs in Iraq. Well, that didn't happen. In fact, it escalated. So, bipartisan an issue as it is today, something has to be done. The last thing I want to talk about, oh, by the way, when it was put on the list, MEK was put on the list, we were supposed to respond to it. It was the only organization that we were ever told to inquire about. We didn't assign any FBI agents to it. Can you imagine a terrorist organization where nobody was assigned to investigate because we didn't think they were engaging in anything remotely sounding like terrorism? Let me just finish. Let me just conclude briefly. I want to talk a little bit about the Court of Appeals. Judge Mukasey spoke about the opinion, which was last August. But very important, the court reviewed all the facts that the government proffered trying to justify why MEK should be on the list. And the court was not impressed. In fact, they sent the matter back to the Secretary of State saying that the Secretary failed to accord the plaintiff, MEK's representative, the due process protections outlined in our previous decisions, and they therefore remanded. But if you look at some of the language and the way this case was presented to the Court of Appeals, the government actually kept supplementing its brief during the preparation and even prior to the oral argument, twice submitting supplemental unclassified records that were formally classified. Well, they didn't impress the court because they weren't factual and did not go to the issue as to whether this organization was conducting terrorist activities. The State Department, in an incredible statement, this is what the State Department said as they were explaining their sources to the court, quote, sources named and unnamed, the accuracy of which we have no way of evaluating, and that we cannot make any, quote, judgment whatsoever regarding whether the material before the Secretary is or is not true. So the question that Judge Poe asked, where is the evidence? There is no evidence. We haven't seen it. If it's classified, there's a method to present that to the court, which obviously didn't impress them here. It's obviously time to make the right decision, to do the right thing, and we're confident that the Secretary is going to get to that point very, very quickly. Thank you very much.